Good morning, honorable members, ladies and gentlemen who are here from the particular ministry. This sitting is resumed. This honorable house, when the suspension was taken on Friday last, this honorable house was in standing finance committee, considering Head 91, Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community Empowerment, and to that it shall now revert.
This house is now in standing finance committee.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Permission for my team to join me in the well.
Permission granted. You got names here before you. No. No. Good morning, everyone. Just before we proceed, just let me remind for those public officers in particular who are now in the well for the first time, once you begin to speak, you would indicate your name and the position you hold within the particular ministry or agency, and you have You have 3 minutes to respond to any question which may be directed to you through the minister. Thereafter, once you've given your name the first time, you don't need to do so again if you have to respond to a second question or query. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to the Minister and colleagues of the Ministry. Minister, I believe you know where I am going to begin this morning. I don't think it is any secret that I have particularly strong position on the role and function of the National Sports Council, to the extent that it is the institution that carries with it a very serious responsibility for the development of sport, for the engagement of young people, for the maintenance of infrastructure, and therefore the community cohesion and the social capital that comes with all of those responsibilities. It is similarly no secret, I believe by now, that in St. Michael South Central, my team and I have in the past 6 months undertaken our own refurbishment and reintroduction of programs to 2 pavilions. The pavilion at Gully Hill, Grosvenor Road, Carrington Village, and the pavilion at Valerie, which we are this weekend getting ready to complete. They have been undertaken with donated materials, 100%, and 100% of volunteer labor. And the reason we undertook that has to do with the challenges we had with the maintenance of those facilities by the National Sports Council. And I say that with full transparency because the officers sitting behind you, Minister, are well aware. You yourself, Minister, came with me in August of 2023 to examine the conditions of those centers. And in the months that elapsed since, between then and November of 2023, when we were forced to begin our own refurbishment, we got no traction. Minister, my question is as follows. Of the 19.4 million in the estimates as for the National Sports Council in your estimates this year, what part of that and with what execution plan is dedicated to the regular surveillance, because that's where you have to start, surveillance, maintenance, refurbishment of pavilions in Barbados? I know that we are very excited about mini stadia, but let me start where the beginning is. What part of that relates to the regular maintenance of those centers? What is the maintenance plan? What are the human resources, tradespeople, carpenters, masons, all the resources that you need that are available to the Sports Council with what regularity? What is the scope then for engaging artisans from the communities where these pavilions exist? That is what I'm asking, and I know, Minister, that you tend to use the word Center Management Committee quite easily. That's coming in my follow-up question. That's not what I'm asking you about now. I'm asking you specifically about the plan and the resources, the approach to execution of those pavilions in this coming financial year that you have this $19.4 million allocated to the Sports Council.
Thank you for the question, Minister. The truth is that we inherited a plant meaning all of our community centers, and in this case, the pavilions, that were in a state of disrepair. We have had to remove, for example, I'll come back to the communities, to the pavilions, we have had to remove several light poles at our grounds because of the fact that they were rusted at the base and were proven to be problematic in terms of safety. So we have changed out as many as possible. We took down all of those ones that were rusted out. The pavilions is another situation, Minister, where, like I said, we have started the process. There's a dedicated now, we have a fixed maintenance schedule that we are going from pavilion to do repairs that were, I don't know, in a state of disrepair for more than 20 years. So the truth is, monies are allocated. I will have the director of the Sports Council and Mr. Matthias speak to you in terms of plans that we're rolling out to ensure that all of these pavilions are fixed. I must tell you, I am the Minister of Sports, and Gore Hill, there's some work that needs to be done at Gore Hill as well. So it is not a case that we are oblivious to the issues that are happening at the pavilions. I want to thank you because I have been preaching, whenever I speak to clubs and groups, I've been preaching self-help, and you are able to mobilize at your level to have your two communities repaired. But we are doing what is necessary to ensure that we have those pavilions fit for purpose on island. So I will ask the director and Mr. Matthias to come in and speak to you about some of the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Minister Neil Murrell, Director, National Sports Council. Thank you, Minister, Member, MP Cattle, Sir Michael South Central, for your question. The question we have to start with some history. And of the $13 million that we were given last year, there was a serious cut from our requested budget. Of the cut, we had a significant cut in maintenance because of the cuts that we were given last year. However, the National Sports Council still worked with many of the pavilions in terms of trying its best to repair them. We also worked, of course, with some of our partners, sponsored partners, and I'm happy to hear that Minister Cattle would have worked with some of her partners to ensure that the pavilion, the two pavilions she outlined, was fit for purpose. So we are challenged on one hand with a heavy cut in our maintenance budget, but at the same time, we still work assiduously to try to ensure that maintenance is still carried out on a fairly regular basis. What we have done over the last 2 months or so, 2 to 3 months or so, we have gone around to all of the 70 pavilions. We have looked at totality, the maintenance issues. We've put them in a database, and we will then prioritize the work in terms of the maintenance of the pavilion, and also work with some of our partners to ensure that the maintenance is carried out. In terms of the human resources at the council, again, have been stymied very much with the cuts in the budget. We have had to use contract workers for a period of time to ensure that work is carried out. So our human resources is not, certainly not as much as they were in the past. And also in terms of the scope for using the artisans within the community, we see a lot of utility in doing that because it would ensure that persons in the community are given jobs in terms of the upkeep of the pavilion. So in summary though, we are working, we continue to work assiduously to ensure that maintenance is a priority. And we thank Minister Cattle for raising the question. Thank you.
Mr. Matthias, can you weigh in on this as well, please?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicholas Matthias, Senior Superintendent of Works at the National Sports Council. Endorsing what Director Morrill would have said about utilizing as many of the resources that we had available. Resources still pose a bit of an issue at the Sports Council when it comes to our budget being cut based on requests. So we took a holistic approach 2 months ago where we assigned a supervisor to go out and comprehensively research and investigate the issues at all 70 pavilions. And coming out of that, he has generated a report where we will prioritize certain pavilions as we go along. But I must stress, as the director has said, it can only be done based on the resources we have available. And without those resources, monetary, human, we still will have to prioritize what we can. And as time goes on and resources come in, we will continue to go and get our repairs and maintenance done at these facilities. Outside of that, we still are dedicated to trying to keep the pavilions open to the public and actively so. And we will dedicate ourselves in this financial year to doing that as well.
Just by way of follow-up, if I may, I've had a look at your estimates for the current financial year ending the end of March, and I do not see any particular reduction to the maintenance, but we won't quibble over that matter at the moment. Where I do want to follow up is, I thank you for the reply, Minister and team, but I'm hearing a lot of adjectives. And it prevents me from having any clarity or specificity with respect to my question regarding a fixed maintenance schedule and fixed surveillance. Minister, you said in your reply that you've been preaching self-help, and I got a lot of congratulations from your staff in their reply about the extent to which, as the Member of Parliament, I had to hit the road to find resources to address issues that must be a matter of state. So I, with all due respect, don't revel in those congratulations. I thank the private sector entities and the tremendous input of the volunteer artisans. But they came in a situation where children in communities who wish to play sport and who wish to access their centers could not do so safely. In a situation where at the Valerie Pavilion, the repairs remain outstanding, notwithstanding having been submitted repeatedly. But beyond that, the question of the opening hours of the pavilions and indeed the working hours of the staff who are paid to keep them open must also attract the attention of the supervisory staff and the management of the Sports Council. I would like to hear from you. I mean, I don't know if you're minded to give some more specificity to a maintenance plan, because what I heard in the answer just now had none. But I would like to hear from you now about the extent to which we can expect to see posted on each pavilion what the opening hours should be, because that would go a long way to help people understand what they can expect and how they can expect to be served. Certainly, we intend, and when I say we, I mean the groups and communities that frankly had no choice but to mobilize in order to get their pavilions in working order. We are considering the idea of having a charter for the operation of our pavilions. I would like to suggest that the Sports Council may wish to do the same, to have a basic standard of service and agree a basic standard of service that our communities deserve. So I'd like to hear from you, Minister, the extent to which we can expect to see posted on each pavilion the opening hours, the extent to which we can expect to have, again, a plan that will be shared with the public on how opening will be managed. You have spoken in the past at length about center management committees, but having gone through the work of working with my communities to help them jointly identify people to sit on these center management committees, we are none the wiser as to how they will function and to what extent they will have resources and how they will go through their decision making. As I close the question, I will tell you this. It is not just a question of having those committees in place, but it is also a question of having some agreement to the mission within the Sports Council. We have seen scenarios where, while we were doing the work ourselves to refurbish the pavilion, there were staff of the Sports Council that were coming there and dragging a hose through the pavilion and washing the van on the hard court. Staff who came and threw grease from rolling the lines on the pasta up against the wall that we had just painted. What is the charter that exists in the Sports Council then? What is the commitment to service that exists in the Sports Council then? And when can we expect to see that improved and renewed? Please.
Thank you for your questions, Minister. The reality is that staff is paid to be at those community centers for the regular working hours as most civil servants. I would now have to investigate to see what is possible in terms of staggering hours to have persons at the locations after 4:30. You mentioned the Center Management Committee, and I will go back there because that is one of the solutions to rectify the problem that you have mentioned. After 4:30, the Center Management Committees that will be put in place, drawn from members from within the locale of the particular pavilion, would be functioning in a way to provide training for those persons who wish to utilize the facilities. We fully understand that there will be a need for like bathroom facilities for changing and those type of activities. The ministry is undertaken we have started the Community Coaches Program, and the Community Coaches Program is to be rolled out at some of our same or all of our pavilions. The only way that we're going to make that possible or make that happen in the way that we expect it to is if those community centers that you have mentioned are problematic, have these center management committees in place. Now, I don't think that management of Sports Council can really be held responsible for a staff member who's at a location using the holes and all of that to wash down vehicles. Unless that information is fed to management, we would not be aware of that on a day-to-day basis. So I thank you for raising it. Obviously, we would shed some light in terms of how we treat now to managing the locations. But to answer your question, right now, it is a case where our staff work until 4:30. Unless those center management committees are put in place to come and function in a similar way to what we're doing with the community centers, then I really am not sure how I can answer your question in terms of facilitating the needs of those persons who would want to use the facilities after hours. It is the only solution unless, like I said, that we can find a way to stagger the working hours of the caretaker or the person who is responsible for the said location.
Thanks, Minister. Forgive me if, in my very deep feelings and concerns about this matter, I did not make my question clear. What I was trying to get clarity on was the mode of functioning of the center management committees at the pavilion. And I won't ask you to revisit it, but I'll tell you why I asked it before I move on to my second question. I asked it because the way that human beings feel and react is that we are asking people to volunteer their time and their commitment in circumstances where they may have cause to question the time and commitment of those who are paid to make efforts in this regard. So I will leave that with you to reflect on. But I will also say that the committees need very clear guidance on how they are to function, because here you have a volunteer group of people, committed though they may be, they are people from a community who just want to help. And so they can't tell you, they can't give you unless you give them very clear guidance and instructions. And to be quite frank, not necessarily financial resources, but some resources, at the very least, to know that when they call the Sports Council, somebody's going to come and help them. But I move on to my second question that now has to do with the Community Development Department. Perhaps this question might be a bit pedestrian, but I ask you, Minister, to humor me. We have pavilions in my constituency. We do not have community centers. And so the pavilions are meant to be managed by the National Sports Council. I understand that you have a kind of a division of labor where you have community centers, those are managed by the Community Development Department. But it seems to me that community development still needs to happen in communities that don't have community centers. And so there was a time, 2018, 2019, when I had a clear sense of who the community development officers were that worked in a particular area. I am not sure if that has changed. I am also not sure of the community development program for the communities that I have the privilege to represent. So I would just like an explanation, please, about how does the community development department make itself felt and go about the business of investing in community development in cases where they do not have community centers in those locations?
All right, thank you, Minister. First, let me just go back because you mentioned volunteer. I coach 3 basketball teams in St. John, including a female team at the point in time. None of the coaches that coach on island, as far as I know, are paid to coach the teams that they're charged with. So volunteering at community level is nothing new. It has been there from time immemorial, and I think it will continue. So in relation to having persons work with the center management committees, yes, the Sports Council will provide a detailed document in terms of the terms, the TOR for those particular center management committees, where the Ministry of Sports, so in terms of resources, if there's a need to have balls or cones or whatever, that is something that can be facilitated through the ministry. But you asked about community development. In my area, my community center is currently under repairs. And we meaning community development, had to stage a training program at the Gore Hill Pavilion. As you know, Minister, every single ministry, we're pouring from the same governmental cup. So to construct community centers at every location is not something that can happen all at once. But community development are actively engaged in running programs at different locations to benefit those persons who we deem to be the target population. Community development focus a little more over the age of 18 than the mainstream ministry. But I will allow Ms. Keat to come in and share with you some of the programs that are happening through the community development. And in some cases, if there are no community centers, we are prepared to use buildings that are available, i.e. school, churches that are close to the area. Ms. Keat?
A very pleasant good morning to everyone. Well, in response to Minister Cattle's query in relation to the practice of community development, well, I would have to start first by, just emphasizing that we had a number of centers which were scheduled for repairs, or which are still scheduled for repairs. Indeed, the practice of community development is that we go into the communities, we identify the needs of those communities, and then we treat or we have that particular intervention. What I have instructed the staff, we had a staff meeting, this would have been last week, and this is really the emphasis now, because we have quite a number of the centers which we fixed, and therefore the focus now at this point in time is to ensure that the officers, they are going into the communities, and we are going to provide those needs assessments, and based on the needs assessments, then we would plan the particular intervention. And in the past, when I was a community development officer, and I know the practice of seeking facilities other than community centers. Like for instance, we had a program in St. Thomas, and we are well aware that we don't have a facility there in St. Thomas, but we have a pavilion, and limited as the space was, we carried out community interventions in that particular location. So what I have tasked the staff with now is that we need to get back to the practice of community development as we knew it in the past. And certainly, when I started acting as Chief Community Development Officer, and forgive me, Chair, if I did not introduce myself at the beginning of my discourse, my name is Yolande Skeet. I am the Acting Chief Community Development Officer. And I commenced acting in 2022. And certainly what I would have found, as I started by saying, it was a dearth of community interventions. And the first task was really to fix those community centers which were out of operations, and to ensure then we have space rather than seeking then to either have to go into a location where we sometimes have to go into a school. It means then seeking permission. The ideal situation for us would be to have a community center where we can carry out our community interventions. But certainly, Minister Cattle, as I started in the beginning of my discourse by emphasizing the community development officers, they are tasked with going back into the communities and mobilizing those communities. When in 2022, some of the officers were engaged in non-social work activities. So therefore, it meant then a matter of, having a look at the human resources we have in the department and ensuring that those were deployed as was necessary. So my commitment is to ensure that coming out of With the commencement of the new financial year, all of the officers, including myself as the Chief Community Development Officer, because I believe you should lead from the front, we are going into those communities where we had a dearth of activities for quite a number of years. And certainly, we are going to ensure that we have gone back to the practice of community development.
Thank you, Minister and Chief. At least you'll be happy to know that you'll have 2 brand new pavilions, newly refurbished pavilions, one at Gully Hill and one at Valerie, to use for your activities. But we look forward to that engagement to have community events that help build social capital in communities, going again, in particular in areas in St. Michael where we have high populations, dense populations, people in need of recreation and other kinds of activities. My final question has to do with the role of the ministry in understanding its impact, which I know, Minister, can be difficult in the work that the ministry is engaged in. Certainly when a ministry executes a range of programs investing in young people, as you have outlined when you addressed us on Friday, attribution is difficult. In development, when we talk about attribution, we mean, can we honestly say that a particular change was caused because of the programs that we've run or the intervention that we've made? But, Minister, you have to be able to do that to some degree. You have to be able to satisfy us that the investments that are being made in young people, whether it's Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme, or the Building Blocks Legacy Program, or the program that your liaison, Mrs. Stevens, is doing with the young people to start businesses, whether they're having the impact, but particularly the impact on youth unemployment that we want to see. So my question is this: you have a sports policy, you have an emerging youth policy, emerging if not complete youth policy. You have a range of programs. You mentioned a tracer study, but I wanted to hear a bit from you on how are you sure, or how do you know, or how do you consider the impact that these various interventions are having on young people's access to income and some of the other things that you're targeting through your programs? What does success look like, and how do you know whether you're having this impact?
Thank you, Minister. Let me speak particularly right now about Project Dawn, and you ask about the impact. Project Dawn would have seen, since June last year, I believe that is when it was reconstituted, about 17 businesses started from those individuals who lie on the blocks across this country. So we use that as a gauge in terms of the impact of Project Dawn. The opening statements from the leader of the opposition spoke about vetting. And I did my research, and yes, in a sense, the ministry engaged in vetting, and I will speak to it now. A number of our young people are vetting at the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic. They're vetting at the Barbados Community College. They're vetting at Vocational Training Board. And all of the DJs are tutors at those particular locations. But you spoke and you asked particularly about work. We have just expanded, Minister, the role of YES in terms of providing satellite locations for those persons who want to be self-employed. In my initial opening on Friday, I would have indicated they would have touched, for this financial year, 400 individuals who would have sourced training under the Youth Entrepreneurship Scheme. We have made attempts to ensure that all of our vocational programs now are certified for two reasons. One, if persons are interested in the same self-employment, or if they're looking for entry-level qualifications to different areas of work, then now that is now par for the course in relation to our programs. In addition to that, we have youth officers who provide tracking service to ensure that those persons who come out of the program are using the skill sets that they would have acquired as a result of being engaged. So my simple answer to you is yes. We have evidence to suggest that persons who source training from the ministry are looking to get gainfully employed, or they're starting their own businesses. So yes, that is the short answer, that we are seeing the results as a result of our training programs.
Thank you, Minister. Chair, that brings me to the end of my questions. I just want to close by saying, Minister, and to the departments that make up this ministry, that you may not have the largest budget in these estimates, but these interventions and the responsibility of this ministry is tremendous. And, you know, we always say not everything is tax and spend. A lot of this work is moral and strategic leadership that this ministry has to engage in, to be able to demonstrate to young people and communities that we care about them, that we see them, that we feel them, that we hear them, that we are listening. And I just encourage this ministry to continue to do that. And where you feel, Minister, honestly, that you are not getting it right, because we don't always get it right, to commit to improving, because the price of not doing so is too great. Minister, Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Honourable Member for St. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. My first question, Minister, you would have spoken last week about the efforts that your ministry put in place in terms of reaching persons at the grassroots level, persons on the block, young people in the community. Now, I want you to speak about some of these programs that you have put in place. And in your answer, I want you to look specifically at road tennis in this country and the efforts that your ministry has made to revitalize and to elevate the profile of road tennis. You've seen some evidence that certainly Barbadians and certainly this ministry has taken road tennis far more seriously than certainly other governments in the past have done. But I just want you to speak to where we are in terms of engaging with persons in the community and any types of collaborations with schools or other community groups to ensure that, yes, sports is promoted right across the community, but also that road tennis, our indigenous sport, is also promoted and given the type of respect that we think that is due after so many years.
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. You mentioned persons at community level, and you more than most would be aware that Project Dawn was launched in your community, where the ministry provided 25 acres, I believe, of land at Belle Plaine for those persons in your constituency who were interested in farming. You mentioned road tennis, and I thank you for the question, because there's this belief that government is trying to hog road tennis, but we are tasked with developing road tennis because it is our indigenous sport. Now, to date, we have painted on request, and in some cases, because of the visuals that people were playing, more than 380 road tennis courts across this island. We have had requests from several schools, and we were able to facilitate those requests from the head teachers to have road tennis at the location. Last year, we had the National Invitation Road Tennis. And I mentioned in a different location, and I'll mention here now, it is the first sport in Barbados that would have been carried by 23, I believe, different countries. Our finals at the gymnasium. For the first time on island, I believe outside of cricket, line technology was used in that finals at the gymnasium. Only on Saturday, and you spoke about what is happening at the community level. Only on Saturday, I launched the National Sports Council / European Union Road Tennis Academy at Blemham. 26 on the 16 young individuals, males and females, participated in that launch. On a regular basis, they're engaged in coaching, having a coach carry them through the rudiments of road tennis at the location at Blenheim. And one of the things that I've asked for is that we do not just engage in road tennis, but all of the different life skills are brought to bear in the program to ensure that we have a holistic development of our youngsters who are involved in road tennis. We have a situation where several countries, including some from Africa, would have indicated an interest in road tennis. And we have started the process of doing a coaching program for those persons who now we will have to export as coaches. So it provides an opportunity for employment to those individuals who will be going overseas to engage in coaching road tennis. But I will ask Mr. Rowe to give you some additional information in terms of what we're doing to make sure that road tennis reach the pinnacle in terms of maybe at some point in time having a look-in at Olympics. Mr. Rowe?
Thank you, Minister, and member for Sananjo. Now, one of the things that has been of burning concern has been the control of road tennis, and road tennis being a sporting discipline. While there is regulation of road tennis, there is no control of road tennis, so to speak. If we are putting road tennis out there, then it should be regulated. And in that regard, we have started the process, and we are fairly far advanced with respect to setting up an international road tennis federation, which would be the international governing body. And in that regard, we had some initial discussions, through the Barbados Olympic Association with the International Olympic Committee. And they have outlined a pathway that we must travel. Fairly stringent, I must say. It entails becoming affiliated with the Alliance of Independent Recognized Members of Sports, which is an umbrella body that looks after those international governing bodies that are seeking affiliation with recognition with the International Olympic Committee. And thereafter, we're supposed to seek affiliation with the Association of International Olympic Committee Recognized International Sports Federations, MOFO. And that's an entity that looks after the international governing bodies that are not yet on the Olympic agenda, and there are well over 40 of them, like squash and chess and netball and the like, that have been knocking on the doors of the IOC for quite some time. Now, in seeking to get our ducks in a row, we have looked at the areas of we drafted the Constitution as well as the bylaws. We've looked at the areas that we need to protect with respect to copyrights, as in the rules that speaks to all the specifications of the implements, because we are aware that there is a concern about losing road tennis. We've looked at the trademarks, right, and things of that nature. The general thinking is within the ministry is that if we can establish the International Road Tennis Federation, then it says to not only Barbados and our communities, but the world, that we're serious about road tennis and we're serious about taking road tennis out there. And as the minister would have mentioned, there are quite a few countries that have already come on board that are looking to us for guidance, and they're eagerly awaiting the establishment of that International Road Tennis Federation. Thank you.
Engagement with communities and with schools. Well, as you all here are well aware, we in the Ministry of Transport and Works, we are paving a lot of roads. And one of the things that you will notice when you have a nice newly paved roads, one of the things that are requested, that is requested almost immediately after you get a new road is a tennis court. Almost every community is asking for a tennis court as soon as they get a nice smooth road on which to play. So in terms of the engagement with the communities, are there any efforts to engage communities? Because what I've found is that unless there's someone, existing road tennis culture within a community, then there's nowhere, I don't see persons coming in to communities to encourage persons to play road tennis. All right, so that's something that perhaps we can look at now that people actually have the first step, which is the good surface, which would follow by, I know that the council goes around and they paint courts for persons in communities. So that is established. But also in schools, I think, and I said it about 2 years ago, that I believe if we don't get road tennis in schools, if we don't root it in schools and in primary schools, then the possibility that we may lose it is still there. So can you please tell me about the efforts to engage more schools and certainly engage primary schools?
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. Yes, you're correct. We have started the process of going into the schools. The academy that I mentioned was drawn from predominantly primary schools, and these individuals were selected by our coaches who are involved in the primary school setting. So we have started the process of engaging the primary schools, hence the academy that was launched on Saturday. And as more schools come on board, then we will expand the program. I would have mentioned earlier, I believe, about our community coaches program that is geared towards doing exactly what you're speaking of, Honourable Member. So we're looking at individuals from within the community who express a particular interest in a discipline, and we're providing the basic training for them at level 1 to go back to the communities to coach. Married to that program, we have now added safeguarding because we know it is absolutely critical to ensure that persons who are tasked with being responsible for our young people need to be functioning at a professional level or to ensure that we have best practices all the time in our program. So the short answer is yes, we are in the primary schools and we're looking to expand the program wherever possible because this is our indigenous sport and we must ensure as a government that the sport thrive.
Okay, thank you. And I don't see why you can't partner with MTW and get a list of all the new roads that we've done in communities and see if you can just go in and put the court, engage those communities with those new roads.
We'll be happy to, sir.
Yeah, believe me, I'm sure that persons would appreciate that. My next question has to do with the playing fields. I note that you mentioned when you first spoke last week that you have taken on a number of schools in terms of cutting the grass for the schools. But what I've found has happened is that because I guess of the increased workload of your ministry, a number of playing fields have suffered. And I've seen playing fields with grass growing maybe as high as 2 feet tall. So I'm asking if there's any provisions in the estimates, given that you have taken on so much more responsibility for providing those playing fields, those communities with resources to cut the grass. I know a lot of persons have taken up jobs cutting grass as young entrepreneurs, but I find that for these large playing fields, you need those drive mowers. And in many cases, teams and community groups have to go around and source those drive mowers on their own, sometimes at a very high cost to themselves and sometimes at a cost to the MP. So I'm just wondering if there's any resources for this increased workload that you've gotten now, that you've taken on these schools. You're going to get increased resources so even that any playing field, any football club or any cricket club won't suffer as a result of their field not being cut.
All right, thank you for the question. Yes, you're correct that we have added responsibilities. We have now been facilitating cutting those fields at some of the primary schools on the island. And yes, we are looking to expand the resources in terms of tractors and different pieces of equipment to assist us. What the National Sports Council did, and y'all remember before you asked about employment, one of the things that the Sports Council did was to engage some of those youngsters on the blocks who acquired or started the landscaping business to come back and assist in terms of helping us to get those locations clean. But I will go to Mr. Matthias to give you a more detailed explanation or as to how we are proceeding in cleaning all of those playing fields that you were speaking of.
Good morning again, everyone. So to continue from what the minister was saying, we have indeed are still in the process of acquiring more drive mowers, as you called it, and tractors with their swipes, and equipment such as lawnmowers, edge trimmers, what's not, to more or less help us to get those fields that would have, as you put it, we would have lost track of. With the additional, the addition of the fields that we would have inherited from the schools, both primary and secondary, we work with the Ministry of Education, especially at the beginning of the school terms, to get those fields cut. And as you can imagine, even with the current resources that we have, there are going to be some of our fields that will take kind of a hit when it comes to that. And we have put in next year's financial budget for resources, essentially, to continue with the mandate that we've been given. And what I would like to say is that as long as we get the support, because we've been getting the support from MTW, we've been getting the support from departments like NCC, also departments like sanitation, in terms of taking away a lot of the stuff that piles up on the so we've been partnering with other ministries to get some of the jobs done. The minister would have mentioned Project Dawn. We have also engaged some of those youngsters on the block to come in and help cut some of our fields. And it's also always a matter of what resources we have available, you know, because these guys still have to be paid, you know. So it's a work in progress, and we do know and we do recognize that it is something that we have to get right, and we are progressing very smoothly towards that. Thank you.
Thank you. My final question. Let me just start by saying that.
Honourable member, final question?
I only asked two. That's two, and this
Not
is
according to my
third.
records.
Sorry?
Go ahead.
Uh-huh.
Proceed.
Yeah. Now it would be. I was making the point that I'm thankful to see for programs like Project Dawn, which was launched by constituency last year, which was really a collaboration between the Ministry of Youth, the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Anglican Church, where the Anglican Church leased land to the Ministry of Agriculture for the purpose of engaging in such activities as planting food security, so on and so forth. So they felt it important that they would use a lot of the land. They have a lot of land right across Barbados, and they felt that in the effort to give back to Barbados, that they would make that land available for persons, young persons, to use for the purpose of agriculture. So I just want to make that point that the Anglican Church was also involved certainly in the land that was leased to the Ministry of Agriculture in St. Andrew, that the Anglican Church came on board and assisted us in that regard. And I've seen a lot of good, but I still see some areas, certainly in my constituency, and just like any other constituency, where there's still some needs for improvement. For example, we are still asking for a community center in St. Andrew, perhaps to improve the facilities in St. Andrew. St. Andrew, and I said it before, is a constituency that has produced so many outstanding Barbadian athletes. Dave Richards, DeAndre Doughton, Jonathan Carter, all these persons would have gone on, and there are more that played for West Indies. I've even gone back as far as Conrad Hunt. These persons would have played for West Indies, and I believe that a bit more effort should be placed into the building out and the development of sport in St. Andrew and the facilities in St. Andrew. We have an outstanding grounds, perhaps one of the most outstanding grounds, cricket grounds in Barbados, but that is a private ground. But whereas the ones owned by government could do with some assistance. In terms of community centers, there's no community center as such in the parish of St. Andrew. We have a facility down there that replaced the old community center. I don't know if people, the residents in St. Andrew would even refer to it as a community center, but it is basically what we have, and we were asking for the center that we had, that was promised to us many years ago, as far back as the 90s, that would more suit the development and the needs of the people of Belle Plaine. Certainly people in Rock Hall, they would have had a community center that was allowed to fall to ruin under the previous administration. In fact, both community centers in St. Andrew were closed under the previous administration. And I need to know if there are any plans at all to provide people of Rock Hall and St. Andrew with a community center, B, improve the facilities at Belle Plaine. Also, in Orange Hill, which is also a very important part of the St. Andrew constituency, though physically in St. James, there's a facility out there, basketball court. I'm told it's the most beautiful basketball court in all of Barbados. And I'm also told that there are plans in train to further develop the court, because they only use half the court on that occasion, and there's another half where there were some lawn tennis courts. But I'm told now that half of the court will also be developed. But one of the things and I've spoken to officers from your ministry about this. Yes, we are thankful for the development, but at the same time, similar to what obtains for the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, we have a situation where there's
Honourable Member, you're taking a very long run-up. You were at the crease. You asked your last question, please, and you've exceeded your time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We have a facility, but there's no bathroom facilities. Children will still have to cross a highway to get to the pavilion where there are bathroom facilities. So my question in short is, as it relates to that particular facility, are there any plans in the estimate for the building out of a bathroom facility there at Orange Hill Higher Courts? Are there any plans for, I know there are plans for the lights, so I just want an update on that. The lights for the playing field where the lights were taken down last year with the promise that they'll be up within a few weeks to months. And if there are any plans for any development of the facilities in sporting facilities in St. Andrew proper. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions. Honourable Member, St. Andrew is one of the locations that we have earmarked to trigger a number of sporting activities because I'm aware that sports in that particular location is almost flat. I will allow either Mr. Matthias or the director to speak about plans in terms of dealing with sporting facilities in your constituency. But I will also ask Mrs. Skeet to address some of the issues that you would have mentioned in relation to the community centers. And let me say to you that if community centers were previously in existence at the locations that you mentioned, every possibility is that those locations are state land, and we should be able at some point in time in the future, if not this financial year, to look at rebuilding those community centers because it is one of the ways that we provide structured activities for our youngsters within the community. And I'm sure that we will look to make sure that you are serviced in those areas where there are no community centers. So Sports Council and then CDD, please.
Good morning again, everyone. In the parish of St. Andrew, I can come to Orange Hill second. But so far in the parish of St. Andrew, we have more or less undertaken to try to adopt the fields and make them ready for cricket, for football. So coming out of the blocks for what I term the internal lighting at Sports Council, where we're trying to get some of the fields back in play. Bell Plain was the first out of the blocks for the fields where we put up lights. We did a minor regrade on them and we put lights on the hard court. As part of the stadia project that's going on, I noticed you mentioned isolation, and yes, it is a private ground, but in partnership with that cricket club at the private ground, where we have put up lights, we're going to put in, we're going to help them to continue to keep their facility in good shape. Conrad Hunt, we've also earmarked, we put lights there. We're going to continue to make sure Conrad Hunt is used. He's a stalwart coming out of your constituency. And so we'll continue to make sure that the ground that's named after him is kept in good shape and utilized as part of programs that we will earmark for the area. Moving on to Orange Hill, yes, you have one, if not the best looking basketball court on the island, coming out of a partnership with Western Union. And we do have plans to further upgrade the lawn tennis side of those courts, possibly, well, not possibly, in the next financial year. I also have, I got it just over the weekend, quotation to get the lights, Orange Hill Hard Court, Orange Hill playing field replaced. And to answer your question about bathroom facilities and not have to cross the highway, which is a concern, as in the safety of the youngsters that will be utilizing the courts. We have looked into having a container type facility, which we will retrofit to have changing rooms, those bathroom facilities that you're talking about, and in general, an area for the youngsters to be comfortable in terms of their basic needs, not only for playing sports, but having team meetings and what's not. So yes, we have put it into our budget and we have considered those options, not just for your constituency, but for others as well, but particularly yours based on the question that was asked.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Minister, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Honourable Chairman. I first beg your indulgence to speak to an issue which was on the news yesterday, and of which I spoke to the Honourable Minister on yesterday when I heard the news report. And I am taking it on myself, sir, as a member of this Honourable Chamber, to speak on what is the law and to warn employers who dismiss employees who are selected and who go and represent Barbados in sports that they are in breach of the law. Section 31C, Roman numeral 8, is very clear on this, sir. And I really don't understand why this should still be an issue in this Barbados, such that it was raised at a branch meeting of the Barbados Labour Party 2 days ago. A dismissal, that section, sir, says a dismissal of an employee contravenes the right conferred on him not to be unfairly dismissed by his employer if the reason for the dismissal is that the employee was absent from work as a result of the performance of a national duty. National duty is defined in subsection 2B of that section 30 to include selection or endorsement of the employee by a relevant locally recognized organization to participate in a number of activities, including a sporting event at the regional or international level, provided the employee so participated. So if an individual, an employee, is selected by a national sporting organization to represent Barbados internationally or regionally, and is subsequently dismissed for that reason, or for that reason being the primary reason, the employer is in breach of the law and is in breach of the Employment Rights Act and is subject to a penalty, paying the compensation for the dismissal, or in my submission, sir, quite honestly, reinstatement ought to be the only real choice of the Employment Rights Tribunal in such a case, unless the employee opts not to be reinstated. And it's appalling that after 12 years of this statute being enforced, sir, that this should still be an issue. I believe this issue was raised in this Parliament already. Whiteside was a member of it. And I don't see why this should still be an issue, because these are the same employers who, when November comes around, are pomposetting that they are so nationalistic, they are so patriotic, they are so patriotic, and in some cases, I'm sure, they are making money out of our independence celebrations or Republic celebrations. And this law makes proper sense, sir, because you want well-rounded individuals. In fact, national duty is also defined to include organizations, members of organizations representing the Boy Scouts and Girl Guides and St. John Ambulance, of which I was once legal advisor, and I believe the Honourable Member for Christchurch East succeeded me as legal advisor. It also includes jury duty, sir, and I recognize that at least 2 criminal court judges recently had to again reiterate to employers in this country that they can't
Honourable
penalize.
member, I also have to reiterate that
Yes,
you should
sir.
ask the question. You have to your 3 minutes.
Appreciate that, sir. But I just want to make this plain, sir, and warn employers that they ought not to be penalizing and dismissing their employees under these circumstances. In terms of the question, sir, Honourable Minister, parenting is a major challenge. Issues of parenting or perhaps lack of proper parenting in Barbados. And you're fully aware that I am conducting such a program every Saturday morning now, parent education. And I am just wondering, Honourable Minister, where in your budget is provision found for advancement of such programs? I know that the Ministry of Crime Prevention has taken the lead on that, but I know funds have been spread across different ministries, at least during this financial year on that. And where is your ministry's provision for that? How much money is provided? And combined with that, Honourable Chairman, is the issue of the Youth Advance Corps, where what I am seeing, and Honourable Minister, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that under Program 77, Sub-Program 567, I am seeing a proposal to reduce the estimates for this coming financial year for the Youth Advance Corps from 19 million last year, $19 million, to only $11.4 million this year. And I was wondering what would inform such a decision to reduce, to that extent, monies allocated for the Youth Advance Corps. First question, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Chair asks you to come with a question. It seems like you asked all 7 one time. But I will respond to you. Yes, parenting is a major concern of the ministry. We have launched last year a mentorship program. We have the youth hotline, and I believe that a parenting program, in particular the mentorship program, I believe that a parenting program should be fused to this particular initiative to ensure that the mentees benefit in a significant way from that parenting program. There's a special projects committee at the ministry, and I've asked them to look at the possibility of rolling out a national parenting program. But embedded in the programming of the youth development program are parenting projects that will come. So I'm gonna ask the Principal Youth Development Officer, Mrs. Titus, to answer you in relation to some of the parenting programs that would have come from her section. And then Director Haynes will respond to you in relation to the BYAC. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members. Andrea Titus, Principal Youth Development Officer. As the Minister of Youth indicated earlier, we are about to launch a parenting program.
Officer, I didn't get the first name.
Andrea.
It's the chair speaking.
Andrea.
Thank you.
Andrea Titus. As the Minister indicated earlier, we are about to launch a parenting program. This is a national program, and this is basically being, it would spiral from our mentorship program, where we want to provide that type of support for the parents who would have been involved with within our mentorship program. And this is something that we are looking at launching actually this month, coming on to the end of March. In addition to that, we would have had one of the officers also launching a parenting program sometime during the month of February as well. But this program that we will be launching in March will what we consider a national program where parents from all across Barbados would definitely be benefiting. Thank you.
Chair, before the director, and I ask forgiveness, before the director speak, let me say to this honorable chamber that the ministry is in mourning because one of our senior officers, Mr. Victor Baval, passed over the weekend, and I want to take this opportunity on behalf of myself and government to extend sincere condolences to his family, and may his soul rest in eternal peace. Director.
Good morning, all. Holly Haynes, Director of the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps. In relation to the question raised by the Honourable Member, the provision, we were $8 million short in the provision in relation to the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps. We have subsequently requested a move-in the estimates through the Ministry of Finance. And once that is approved, we will see the construction of the classroom block, the construction of the kitchen cafeteria or the auditorium block, and the continued infrastructural work of the second phase of the Barbados Youth Advanced Headquarters. Once we have the funds in this new financial year, we expect to complete the BYAC headquarters in April of 2025. And this really will end the journey of having a permanent home for the Barbados Youth Advanced Corps, so we can cater to 300 persons per intake, a total of 900 persons. And this will represent a historic movement, occasion for as we seek to respond to the development needs of our young people.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. My second intervention, Honourable Chairman, relates to a constituency issues and Weston. There's a community centre at Weston, of course, and Honourable Minister, I know that 3 years ago, I think, as COVID then came upon us, monies had been allocated in the estimates for pursuit of robotics at that center. I see under your sub-program 437 Community Technological Program, there's $2.6 million allocated for information technology provision to the masses, and I'm wondering if provision is in there for the advancement of information technology at Weston, which had been the intention, as I said, about 3 years ago, but then had to be curtailed, but also at the community center at Sion Hill. And also, Honourable Minister, if there is still an intention to put a mini sporting facility at Weston behind the community center, which could accommodate netball and basketball. There's not enough space for wider sports there. And finally on Weston, Honourable Chairman, the issue I got up to today calls from constituents that there are issues with the use of the community centre and the Community Development Department curtailing or hindering that use for a reason that has not been made known to, for example, the Western Fisherfolk Association, who used to have use of that centre on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then was suddenly told that for some reason, because of some issue, they couldn't be used. And I really think that in the interest of accountability, if there are challenges, it should be known to my constituents, especially those in the Western area.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I remember doing a site visit with you at the location in relation to the addition of sports, and I will ask Mr. Matthias to address you on where we're at as it relates to the small area adjacent to the community center. As it relates to the community technology program, we have put that on pause at this point in time. We have to do some reviewing of the program. So right now, it is not currently going. But I will ask after Mr. Matthias, Mrs. Skeet to come and speak to you in relation to what is the position in relation to the usage of the community center at Weston. Mr. Matthias?
Good morning again. I was on that site visit, that initial site visit, in regards to the basketball, netball court at the back of the facility. And we did proceed to get, to start that process. But in that process, there came an issue with the right-of-way when they come to the boundaries that was raised on a secondary site visit. Two of the residents came out and inquired as to what our approach was. When we did our research through National Housing and Land and Surveys, there was a right-of-way in the initial area where we wanted to put the full court. So we had to rethink the idea and come up with a plan of action. We would have requested that the area be surveyed so we could see those boundary marks clearly, and that has not been done up until this point. But we have not forgotten, and we are still, we still have the best done in terms of making that basketball, netball facility a reality.
Good morning again, everyone. In relation to the question of the use of the Weston Resource Center, last year, there was the construction of a fish market, temporary facility, in the car park of the Weston Resource Center. And since then, we've had a water bill of in excess of $800. I've asked the officers who are assigned to that area to conduct a site visit. That site visit is due to be undertaken sometime during the course of this week. Certainly, we understand the state of disrepair the Weston Resource Center is currently in, and it is all in an attempt to ensure that those persons, the center patrons, that they have a safe space where they can have their community activities. Certainly, it is not an attempt to hinder the use of the facility, but those persons who are familiar with that facility, you can see the state of disrepair. The windows are starting to fall out whenever it rains. Rain is there's a lot of water seepage going into that building. That building is predominantly wooden, so therefore that is the challenge to the eastern side. We have an engineer's report, and the engineer's report, which is on file, it did indicate that it is going to take a substantial amount of money to ensure that the Weston Resource Center is pressed back into an acceptable state of use. But what I can assure is that we have allocated $300,000 in this financial year to commence those repairs. But the challenge now is because there is the temporary fish market in that particular area, that is going to be the challenge. So we have to ensure that facility, which is over to the seaside of the road there in Weston, that facility is completed. Then the persons who are actually taking residence now in that car park, that is moved before we can undertake the refurbishment of that facility. But certainly, we have allocated in this financial year $300,000 to commence the repairs. And what I can say here is that the Weston Resource Center might be similar to some of the other resource centers we were challenged with preparing for the last 2 or 3 financial years. They had to be undertaken in phases. For instance, those persons who are familiar with Grisette's was also in an awful state of disrepair, and we had to undertake that refurbishment there in 3 phases. Similarly, Gall Hill. And as we go on, we are going to treat to those areas, but certainly you have to bear with us because we have seen an aggressive maintenance program which commenced from 2020 and is still currently ongoing. But I would have to caution, in this particular maintenance unit, there's only 2 persons who are actually responsible for maintenance at this point in time. I was tasked with the responsibility as Deputy Chief Community Development Officer acting, and now I am still tasked with that responsibility as Chief Community Development Officer acting. And then there is a maintenance supervisor in the ministry. So it's just the 2 of us, a 2-man army, ensuring that we have carried out an aggressive maintenance program within the last 2 financial years. So certainly we are going to treat to those areas, but it is going to take some work because of the extensive repairs which are required.
I thank the officers for those responses, but just wish to say, one, yes, I'm aware of the challenge at Weston with the proposed very many sports facilities, but would urge the ministry that there are no recreational areas for sports in St. James North along the coast. Nothing between Maple Cricket Ground and Spikestown playing field. And I really urge the ministry to resolve this issue of lack of sporting facilities along the coast for a quite large percentage of people residing in St. James North. And in terms of the use of the community center, the response of the acting chief is reasonable. I could only urge, and this in my submission is a failure in terms of a lot of government departments, inform the people. Don't just say that, you know, you can't use it. Let them know the reason why. We even have an administrative justice act in terms of these purposes for other issues, for government to inform the citizens who have a right to know when these decisions are taken. My final question, Honourable Chairman, relates to people with disabilities and the National Sports Policy, which I believe is a green paper, Honourable Minister. You could correct me if I'm wrong. You would recall that when the National Advisory Committee, when it was established, met with your ministry, I think it might have been around August 2022, and the issue of more involvement for persons with disabilities in sports in Barbados was vouched, and I believe you subsequently would have set up a committee on it, arising out of further parliamentary group discussions, and I'm just wondering if you can give a report, and if not you, sir, your Director of Sports, on the improvements or advances made to involve persons with disabilities, especially young persons with disabilities, in sports in Barbados, as is their fundamental human right.
Thank you for the question, Honourable Member. Look, yes, we are making moves in relation to including persons with disability in sports. I'm going to ask Mr. Rowe to speak a little bit about the sports policy and what is contained in there. But every effort is being made within the ministry, not only in sports, but to embrace young persons with disability into all of our programs. And a clear indication of that would have been our move into 2 summer camps under our national camps program to facilitate those individuals. But I will ask Mr. Rowe to speak to you a little bit about what is contained in the, and you are correct, at this time, the green paper of the national sports policy.
Thank you, Minister. Well, with respect to the green paper on the national sports policy, if you can just bear with me momentarily so that I can give you the specifics. Okay, Stephen Rowe, Sports Development Officer in the Ministry. All right, thank you for the question, Minister. All right, with respect to the green paper on the national sports policy, what we've sought to do is ensure that the disabled, there are provisions at each juncture to have the disabled embraced in all areas of sports, whether it be sports facilities, whether it be sports programming, whether it be access to training. We've sought in all areas to ensure that the differently able is embraced. Thank you.
I thank you, Honourable Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that Your Honour reports progress to Madam Honour Deputy Speaker and beg for leave to sit again.
The question is that I do not report progress to Her Honour Deputy Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this... Go ahead.
Honourable members, the chairman has reported to me progress and has asked to leave and to sit again.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move that this honourable chamber be now suspended till 12 noon.
The question is, this House now stands suspended. Honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. Members, this House is now suspended until 12 noon.